Good evening, Chelsea fans. It's been a rough 10 days or so for us after three chastening away games against Leeds, Bournemouth, and Atlanta in the Premier League and Champions League, which has temporarily sent the club into a tailspin. But home comforts again on Saturday against Everton after a admittedly shaky 2-0 victory in that game. We review the week and all the key talking points within it, with a particular focus on Malo Gusto, our chosen topic for this week after a five-star performance at home to Everton on Saturday. We'll also hear from True Geordie Ryan SW ahead of our crunch fixture next Saturday at 12:30 in the Premier League and provide a mini preview of Carabao Cup action away to Cardiff on Tuesday. Let's jump into it.
An abject 2-1 loss in Bergamo capped a dreadful week on the road, but thankfully the Blues stopped the rot with return to the bridge, providing home comforts and a much needed 2-0 win over Everton. Momentary relief, Ryan.
Yeah, indeed, temporary reprieve for Chelsea after a very tricky 10 days or so against Leeds, Bournemouth, and Atlanta. I think as you put it, I think we've temporarily stopped the rot and prevented the sort of descent that we've seen in previous seasons where we go on sort of five, six games without a win. So really important 3 points to Everton, and we don't always need to do it in a pretty fashion. This was very much an ugly 3 points, but a critical one for us ahead of really tricky winter fixtures on the horizon now with Newcastle away next Saturday. I think it's Villa at home and Bournemouth at home following that before a trip to City to kick off the new year. So looking a bit bleak that fixture list, but yeah, really massive for us to get 3 points on the board. I think we'll get into the action on the pitch, but one of the key talking points off the back of Saturday's win was obviously Maresca's press conference, and we know on this podcast and before that, Maresca has been long questioned by Chelsea fans, and there's always been this sort of feeling of discord between the fan base and manager. Some of his quotes last year where he wrote us off from any chance of winning the league. Some of his choices tactically with players playing out of position and his sort of general demeanour has meant that we've never sort of engendered a really positive and sort of happy relationship between manager and fan base. But this week sort of marked a point where we saw internal disgruntlement, I think, at Chelsea between the sporting directors and the manager, which I think will be a really key topic to keep an eye on over the next month or so. I think it's the first time in the new regime that we've really seen this. We've seen managers come and go, but this was their choice. Enzo Maresca was, Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart's yes man of choice when he came from Leicester, who was going to adhere to the model entirely and do everything they say and never kick up a fuss. But we've seen, some discontent from Maresca in the last few months. I'm not quite sure what it is. He's been very cryptic today in his press conference around that. But that will be a really interesting one, particularly with those tricky fixtures on the horizon to monitor.
I very much believe this resides from the frankly embarrassing admission that he wasn't aware that there was an extra substitute at hand against Atalanta. Leading the game, we quickly see our lead slip to 1-1 and then 2-1 with some frankly shocking backtracking from a disjointed backline and a left-hand side for Chelsea that, correct me if I'm wrong, within the past couple of weeks now doesn't seem to have made a tackle. Saw Chelsea trailing 2-1 in Bergamo with subs remaining, with Esteval, our top scorer, our scintillating young prodigy on the bench. And yet we've seen Trev substituted at half time. Yes, he's on a yellow card, but this is professional football. You've got to trust Trev to get through the 90 here. So Trev sub for Fofana, then sub for Tosin. I mean, it really speaks volumes to the chaos. And to add insult to injury, we see Malo Gusto coming on in the number 10 position with the Brazilian star boy, as I mentioned, stuck on the bench. We called for Josh, justice for Josh, and our calls were answered with his inclusion in the lineup in Bergamo, and he delivered a phenomenal performance. I think he was man of the match for me, some incredible blocks. inclusion very much justified, but ultimately some perplexing comments and contradictory selections on the pitch, very much leading to a boiling point, particularly as Chelsea dropped crucial points in the league and the Champions League that ultimately make outcomes very difficult going forward.
I think coming into this game, we'd obviously covered in last week's podcast that the soft underbelly associated with this young Chelsea side was really exposed once again with those away games to Leeds, Bournemouth, Atlanta. But I think we saw a lot of the fear that was produced in those matches on show against Everton in that first half, at least when we started. I was really happy that that game wasn't actually in one of the televised slots because it was really quite embarrassing at times. It was very slow, lethargic. The midfield, obviously, with the gaping hole of Moises Caicedo serving his third game of suspension, being cut open at will by the likes of Dewsbury Hall initially before he went off injured. Iliman Ndiaye and Jack Grealish getting a lot of space and breaking through the vast midfield lines between sort of Enzo Fernandez and Reece James. Want to pick up on a couple of particularly poor performances, as I like to do, focus on the negatives to start. Enzo Fernandez, I think the real Enzo Fernandez has truly stood up in the last 10 days and reverted to type, as we mentioned last week. And I don't blame him to an extent. I find it bizarre that is simply undroppable in this team. I think even he would prefer to be taken out of the spotlight temporarily, play 50 minutes or start on the bench and come on and make an impact. But he's jaded beyond belief, and at this point, he can't even string a 5 yard pass. There was times where we were under the cosh, the ball would turn over, we'd have a chance to go sort of 3-on-3 or 4-on-3, and Enzo would kick it straight back to their team, which was just unbelievably frustrating to the chagrin of all the dinosaurs around me in the stadium. Garnacho, dreadful performance, probably his worst for Chelsea so far. I think that obviously the inflection point in that game for him was that terrible back pass from the Everton. I think it was Mikalenko, which gave Garnacho practically an open goal, but he couldn't take that in his stride and put it wide and followed it up with a string of other misses and poor decisions on and off the ball. Your favourite topic, George, the atmosphere. I thought it was really bad. And I think it tends to be the case for all the Saturday 3 p.m. kickoffs. I think it's a mixture of anxiety from the fans, but also the abundance of day trippers and tourists that I always have around me. It's a new group every week of people just there to take photos, pretty much. But not much we can do about that. Definitely has an effect on the team. But to jump onto a few positives, we'll get onto Malo Gusto in detail. The return of Cole Palmer, who you can see is probably playing at about 60%, but was lethal when he got that chance in on goal and showed bright sparks. And I think managing him correctly, as we're obviously doing with his upcoming absence against Cardiff, is going to be really key. Reece James held the fort in midfield, doing the job of two men in the absence of Enzo Fernandez. And Robert Sanchez, again, there was a couple of really subtle saves that he made in that game. I think it was one where Idrissa Gueye blasted the ball across the box, and I thought it was a terrible cross initially, but having seen the replay, it was actually going straight to, I think it was Thierry Barry, I think his name is. And yeah, Sanchez got in the way and flicked it wide for a throw on, which was really critical at that point in the game. Centre backs, I can't believe I'm saying it, but Wesley Fofana looks absolutely indispensable in this team at the moment. A really bright performance from him and forging a pretty strong partnership with Chalobah at the back there. So to conclude, I guess on Everton, a big win, but so many question marks and so many spells within that game whereby Everton could have scored one or two, and I think we got really lucky. You'd even recall the Iliman Ndiaye off the post chance that really could have changed the game. So we got lucky. Big win, but so many bigger tests to come.
A 2-0 win at home to an inform Everton is undoubtedly a top result on paper. But I would agree the reality was far from it. An element of Moyes and toffee tax. I believe David Moyes is now winless in 21 attempts at the bridge, and Everton have not won at Stamford Bridge since 94-95 season. You mentioned our goal kind of living a charmed life. I thought Bobby Sanchez was more than all right again this week. We did see two moments of absolute top draw quality. Firstly, a magical through ball from Malo. and Cole Palmer doing Cole Palmer things. We'll speak about him later, but far from an all-round performance, but ultimately those crucial moments, delivering a goal to break the deadlock and change the dynamic of the game was absolutely crucial here. And then the second goal, an absolutely scintillating counter-attack. We've praised Pedro Neto of late. The way he blitzed past Mikalenko was absolutely phenomenal. More of that, please. And Malo Gusto arriving late to score his second goal of the season, his second goal in blue. As we said, we're going to delve into his performances of late and in recent years. From the ridiculous to the sublime this past week, we've seen him deployed as a number 10 in Bergamo and follow it up with a goal and an assist and a clean sheet against Everton in a man of the match performance back at right back. Malo Gusto.
Our topic of the week, Malo Gusto, who I think was mentioned on the first podcast that we ever published because he felt so sort of symptomatic and emblematic of the team in that we know the sort of high levels he can reach, but we only ever really tended to see it in the biggest games and the biggest stages against the likes of sort of Carabao away, Sunderland at home. We'd always see him sort of flounder, which I think was really representative of the side generally. On Malo Gusto, I think he's had a pretty sort of mixed career comprised of many highs and lows at Chelsea. He obviously came in good value for money, I think 35 million from Lyon. Incredibly young. I think he arrived at sort of 19 years old. He's still only 22. Deployed as a traditional right back under Pochettino and with sort of mixed joy in that first season in 2023-24. We've then seen under sort of Maresca. He's never sort of been deployed as a traditional right back, and we've seen a mixture of him, as you say, at centre mid, being deployed at cam, which just seems utterly ridiculous for a player who scored his first ever goal, I think 2-3 weeks ago. But we've seen him to begin to make real strides in the last few weeks, starting probably from the international break where he got, I think, his first call up to the senior France international side, which was a big moment for him, and was rewarded with a start and two assists in one of their games, which I think was great. And he carried that form into post-international break Chelsea with a was it Wolves? Yeah, I think it was Wolves where he scored his first goal. Followed it up against Everton with a really important goal on the stroke of half time to make it 2-0. And also before that, setting up Palmer for a goal. So he's starting to have a real sort of tangible impact in this team in the form of goals and assists. But we know, he's by designation a right back, but he doesn't play like that for Chelsea. I struggle to put my finger on what his role is currently in this team, but he is having a major impact right now. What do you think the sort of outlook is for Gusto moving forward under Maresca?
I think you bang on in your assertion that he kind of typifies Blue Coat's Chelsea. You said there that 30 million was good value. I actually questioned that at the time. How much return on investment is there for a kind of right back position? There's no assurances that he was going to be the player he potentially looks as if he could be today. So again, I question the fee given the Blueco model. Have they potentially predicted a market that would continue to grow and grow and grow with the bubble bursting somewhat during COVID, but recovering recently? To be seen there. He was then loaned back to Lyon for 6 months, which again seems classic Blueco. How many players do we now have on the books applying their trade elsewhere, permanent injury risk before they've even set foot on a pitch at Stamford Bridge and shown some value for Chelsea Football Club? But he was ultimately tasked at the age of 19, stepping up in the place of Reece James' sustained absence. This is a very tall order in which he would sink or swim. And I would argue that he's both sunk and swam in blue. Deployed as a traditional overlapping fullback under Poch, I think we saw great promise. I think 6 assists that debut season, some really memorable games, locking up some top wingers, the likes of Luis Diaz, one-on-one, but understandably some kind of criminal lapses in concentration at times that meant we had to endure the likes of Disassi at right back as a result of inconsistency and injuries. So I would say at the time, clearly an oversight from Bluco in terms of squad management. But under Maresca, his role, as you say, has been utterly baffling. He's clearly a big fan of his, but he's been deployed absolutely everywhere. We've seen him rarely actually deployed as that kind of traditional overlapping right back. We've seen him on the left. We've seen him tasked inverting, which I would wager initially he very much struggled with. I think he's got top defensive attributes and attributes on the ball, but at times he's been shown the struggle marking space. We saw some poor example execution, not kind of scanning, reading play at the Club World Cup. And Forest away comes to mind more recently, where we lived a charmed life. But he's definitely improving in that inverting slash centre mid role. He does bring bundles of energy. But I would say, just like Maresca, he is very much learning on the job. So we see a string of disaster classes, and then we'll see some 10 out of 10 performances. I think of late, brilliant against Arsenal. That Everton display on paper is probably his best yet in blue. But he's the kind of player that just when you write him off, he comes back firing. And then just when you start to really back him and warm to him, he drops an absolute stinker. So emblematic of Chelsea, Blue Coast Chelsea, as you say. Let's hope he's finally coming of age.
I think with Malo Gusto, it's tricky to really gauge what level he's at as a result of having been deployed under Maresca in various positions, from sort of right back, inverting through to sort of centre mid and attacking midfielder, as we saw recently against Atalanta. But I wanted to try a little game with you just to sort of gauge where you think he's at in relation to the rest of sort of the Premier League's right backs. So I'm going to list names of rival teams' right backs, and you'll tell me if you'd swap them with Gusto.
Let's have it.
Kieran Trippier,
No chance.
Ben
Washed.
White,
No, on the 10 beds.
Jed Spence,
Nah, limited beyond his dual ability.
Connor Bradley,
No. Flashes a couple of seasons back, but no chance. Shown found wanting this season.
Joel Veltman,
No. Solid squad player, decent operator, but nowhere near the
Ma
talent.
Mateus Nunes,
Really promising, really interesting positional shift there. But no, as a right back, I'm having Malo marginally.
and in the here and now, I think this one might test your loyalty to Gusto, but I'm going to throw you a Matty Cash.
Again, in a hot streak, some beautiful goals of late. But I think Cash is very much prone to defensive lapses as well. So I'm taking Gusto very marginally for the here and now, and definitely for the long term.
There you have it. Gusto is top of the range in Premier League right backs. Heard it
I
here
think
first.
we'd I think we'd have to concede that Jurriën Timber is marginally takes that berth at the
Oh yeah,
minute, sadly.
there's a reason I left him out.
So the game's continuing to come thick and fast. Eyes now to the Carabao Cup, Cardiff away in a quarter final amidst turmoil off the pitch. How do you see this one?
I think it is probably the best possible draw we could have hoped for in a quarterfinal of the Carabao Cup, and two games, well, three games over the double leg semi-final away from Wembley, which is something we love dearly, and I think we absolutely need to return to after the humiliations against Liverpool in the last few years. Got many wrongs to right there. I think this should, on paper, be a comprehensive win, and we should be dispatching League One opposition without any excuses. But this does have the makings of a potential humiliating banana skin, I think, given the fatigue that's currently in place in our squad. The fact Cardiff, this is quite clearly the biggest game of their season, probably their last two seasons. It's they're going to be up for it. We know we tend to wilt and struggle within a physical battle. We even saw, well, especially the likes of Jamie Gittins and Enzo Fernandez and Garnacho struggle against Lincoln in one of the earlier rounds. So there's absolutely no reason why Why would fare any better if we approach this with the same sort of mentality and complacency as we did that fixture? I do expect to see more rotation in this game. Unfortunately, I am prepared to see that the Dibley brothers, Badia Shiel and Tosin at the back for us, which always spells danger for us, no matter the opposition. I also saw when the draw was made that they've got that bloke up front, Callum Robinson, who scored 5 in 3 against Chelsea in the Premier League and really took it to us in that season under Tuchel. I remember it was Thiago Silva's first game. I think he scored a double and followed up with a goal at the Bridge and a couple others the following season. So he's got a history with us, and I've seen him tweeting about Chelsea in the run up to this. So that should be interesting. I would expect to see Andre Santos coming into midfield for this one, Esteval leading the attack and hopefully providing that sort of flair that we're going to need to get goals from the outset against this probably well-structured Cardiff team. Jamie Gittins, another chance for him to make his mark. He's I think blowing really hot and cold at the moment. We've seen flashes. There was one particular moment against Atlanta where he put Enzo Fernandez through on goal and he inexplicably turned around and lost the ball. Um, Mark Guiu, I would expect to see up front, given the absence of Liam Delap for another 3, 4 weeks. So opportunities for players to stamp their authority and make a bid for a starting berth in the team. But I think, yeah, it should be an interesting one. No excuses. Absolutely need to get ourselves to the semi-final and hope for a favourable draw. And a special shout out to Kellyman. I've forgotten his first name, but I think it's Omari Kellyman, who is on loan to Cardiff. Unfortunately, we've not allowed him to play in this match, but justice for Kellyman.
Huge sigh of relief there, given the prodigious talent that he is signed for 20 million. As you say, this does represent a chance to justifiably rotate the squad and see some of those second string players come in. Enzo Fernandez quite clearly needs a rest. He has been stinking the place out of late, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. There's lots of calls. He's played back to back to back to back games. Let's have him fresh and ready for St James's, where I challenge him back with Caicedo holding his hand to put on a show and reverse our fate in that fixture. The Carabao does present, however, undoubtedly our best chance of a trophy. Maresca's dismissal of both domestic cups with subsequent early exits last season is a massive stain on his tenure. And in the context of potential infighting with the SDs, anything but a win here is completely unacceptable. But I'm going to stay positive and predict a 3-1 win for Chelsea with Mark Gui featuring on the score sheet.
You've stolen my score prediction there. I was just about to say 3-1, but I am going to place additional faith in the superpowers of Tosin and Badiashile in particular to make this a 3-2 win against Cardiff, a nail biter towards the end.
Time now for the opposition view. Newcastle away in the early kickoff at St James's Park on Saturday. And we've got a special guest, colleague, mate, top geordie boy, home and away, Ryan Sidney-Wilmot. Welcome.
Cheers for having me.
Good to have you on, mate. Let's get straight into it. What is the current feeling around the club? I imagine that truly messy moment from Walter Messi on Sunday hasn't helped the vibes.
No, I'd say I was thinking about this in advance. I'd say mixed, but I'd maybe actually go slightly more negative than that. To be honest with you, try to avoid Twitter in the last couple of days for obvious reasons. But I think definitely a negative vibe around the club. I walked away from the ground on Sunday, and I appreciate it's a derby game. Reaction's going to be more emotional than normal, but the consensus or most of the stuff I could hear was how out. That to me seems strong, to be honest with you. I think he's definitely sort of got credit in the bank, but at the same time, I'm not 100% confident he can turn it around. So definitely slightly negative. It's not just Sunday. We've had some horrendous showings this year. West Ham, Brentford, for example. Given the gravity of the game on Sunday, you'd argue that was probably the worst of the lot. It does feel like we've gone backwards, and I think there's a few reasons for that. Isaac left in the summer. We brought Walter Marder in, and that has had to change the way we play. And we still feel like we're adapting. We're adapting to the system, and we're adapting to Voltemada. And we're just taking slightly longer than we'd have liked to do that, I think. The other thing with it is that we obviously invested in the summer. We added numbers. We needed that depth. We've been calling out for the depth for years. But with a little bit of injuries, and also I sort of think Howe's identity as a manager, we've not rotated as much as we could as well. So yeah, overall negative, big week. Obviously, cup game tomorrow. A lot of fans saying like whatever the results are this week, could be a hollow feeling regardless after Sunday.
Very interesting. In typical Chelsea fashion, there is now talk around our manager as well. So Saturday's game could be spicy on that front.
Yeah, definitely. Like from the outside, for me, Maresca's done a pretty good job. I was listening to Carragher talk on him yesterday, and I think when you actually look at just his achievements, given everything that's going on with Chelsea, I think you called it yourself a bit of a circus. I think he has done a good job on paper, but all Premier League clubs, especially big clubs, and especially Chelsea, given the owner, the pressure's always on you. You're only probably over a couple of bad games from really being under the cosh. So I think I read something he maybe called Bowley out as well, or put a bit of pressure on Bowley for January. So interested to see what pans out over this period.
I think you mentioned how potentially taking some flack for not rotating enough. The gripe of Chelsea fans is very much the opposite.
Right.
Wholesale changes for Premier League games, Champions League games. I mean, you get away with that in the Conference League.
Yes.
But not in the Premier League, and definitely not away at Newcastle.
No.
Saturday.
I agree with that. But you, in a way, you've made a rod for your own backs there. The amount of numbers you've got in the squad, you either rotate or players don't get the game time they want, and that creates a problem themselves. So it's a tricky one to get right.
Absolutely. No, I think you bang on. Problem of our own making. But as I say, there will be a fully fit first 11 come Saturday, and thankfully the return of Moises Caicedo. Just from our side, looking at Newcastle, I think Ryan and I kind of agreed that this is among the toughest fixtures in the calendar, if not the toughest for Chelsea.
Yeah.
I think St James's away. I mean, we were there back in May with you pre-kickoff, and even a Sunday midday kickoff couldn't tame the Gallowgate faithful. But it's very much kind of aggressive front foot football. I mean, we were one down to a Tonali goal within minutes. The Jackson
You only
red
just
card,
got in for it, didn't you?
yeah, the Jackson red card obviously didn't help. But I just can't understand with you guys that the disparity between that barnstorming home form and then the kind of inexplicably sort of timid away showing. From my side, I've seen kind of lineups maybe tweaking to a back five, lineups without the striker, without Voltemada. You mentioned he's adjusting, but is it kind of a mentality issue? That's something we've complained about with our team.
I think it's a mixture. The lack of rotation, be it through choice or necessity. I think that you're absolutely so. Generally, we tend to have the wood over Chelsea at St James's, but you're the rule, not the exception. There, we are pretty good at home. I think you make a really valid point about the lunchtime kickoff. Remember going into that game last year, it was a massive game for the sort of bearings of the season, and we came out exactly how I want to see us play. Chasing teams, going after teams. I think that. That's actually the issue with Newcastle. For me, what the biggest issue with Newcastle this season, we're playing more games with being in Europe. We're not rotating quite as much. And for me, Newcastle are a really good team when we come out, high press, high intensity, chase teams all over the park. I don't think we can do. I don't think we're capable of doing it 3 times a week. So I think we're trying to adapt how we play. hesitate to say we're not a very good team, but we're nowhere near the team we are when we play that way. If you look at our away form, we've tended to set up 4-5-1 and not press. At home, barring the Man City game where we were excellent, our form's been patchy at best anyway. You know, we've not really blown anyone away. What I would say is, when it comes to, you know, Chelsea's big game, when it comes to a big game at home, got to give Howard's credit. Normally we're right at it. And if we come out and chase you high intensity on Saturday, we should make a decent fist of it.
I think that midfield three of
100%.
Guimaraes, Tonali, Joe Linton absolutely mauled us last year. I'm very much hoping that you guys take your Derby Day anger out on Fulham in the week, and that there is that kind of rotation and potentially a bit of fatigue there.
I think just like on that point, so we've got Fulham, then yourselves, but then you'll be the same. We've then got a 6-day break before we play Man U on Boxing Day. You'd hope they can empty the tank a bit on Saturday and not really reserve. Because the thing is, where we're getting to sort of in the season, every game's a big game now, especially home games for us, the way we're playing away. We need to beat Fulham, but then we need to be beating Chelsea on Saturday, really, for our season.
I think the same is going to be tasked to Maresca with that increasing pressure in the media, and also our abysmal away record last season is something that absolutely has to change going forward.
Yeah.
Let's go on to predictions for the game then. So how the game's going to play out, and then can I get a final score?
Yeah, gave it a little bit of thought in advance. I think, first of all, I think it's a good time to play us. There's definitely some tension within the squad. I think Bruno came out after the derby, made some comments. Howe's press conference this morning seemed to not fully agree with those comments. So I think in general it's a good time to play in Newcastle. As you said, for me, the midfield is key. We did give you a bit of a mauling last season, but Caicedo for me was still the best player on the park that day. Absolutely love him. So that's a challenge. You've got Cole Palmer back as well, which so that midfield battle is going to be key. I'm not 100% how Newcastle will line up. I suppose, you know, to your point, you're not sure on how Chelsea will line up either. So I think it's a tricky one to call. But I'd say, to my earlier point, you know, if we come out high intensity, press, get the crowd up, I'll go 2-1 Newcastle.
I'm expecting Maresca to come out of the traps here and set us up as if this were a game against a top four opponent or one of the big dogs in Europe, such as Barcelona, Real Madrid, or PSG, as we've seen. We know he can set us up advantageously to win these big games. So hopefully we approach it as such and with the right mentality and don't wilt and get a red card in the first 5 minutes like we did last season there. Always a tricky game. They're going to be up for it, coming off the back of a Derby Day loss against Sunderland, looking to make good with their fans. So I am going to go for a punchy 2-2 draw with Chelsea getting a late equaliser.
Bogey fixture for us. I think even kind of Chelsea under prime Mourinho never won at St James's. 4 straight emphatic losses. Our last success at St James's was a vintage Reece James right wing back showing. Back in October 21. So he scored a phenomenal brace, probably one of his best ever performances.
3-0.
Yeah, sorry, 3-0. Yeah, back in the day. So I'm gonna say with him finally back in the Chelsea side, showing good form, now playing in midfield, I'm gonna call a 1-1 draw. With Newcastle, flying out the blocks, probably Joelinton or a Harvey Barnes goal potentially, but then I'm going to call a Reece James goal, be it a long distance strike, a free kick, with I'm going to say a shaky moment from Aaron Ramsdale, who I have to say I'm not a fan on.
First, I think that's a very sensible take. That's probably where my head falls. Hard go to on Newcastle. I think on the Ramsdale point, calling a spade, I think we've got 2 keepers that aren't really up to snuff. You know, no secret that we tried to get James Trafford in the summer. But I think it's a toss-up who you play when they're both fit, to be honest with you. Pope, good keeper. but is coming flat for a few this season and struggles to kick the ball. Ramsdale's better with his feet, but doesn't command at all. I don't think either are quite good enough, would be my take.
Interesting. I mean, I think at the time when Arteta ultimately churned the keeper position, bringing Raya in for Ramsdale, there was a lot of talk at the time, mainly from the English press, that Ramsdale was hard done by. But for me, he's far from a top keeper. I actually rate Pope highly as a shot stopper. It's interesting, you say maybe a few high-strung kind of errors probably cloud that opinion there. And as I say, I'm hoping that the revival of Robert Sanchez, we're going to need him on his best form at the weekends to keep out some of that early pressure.
I think so. I'd say at the weekend, like as it was last season, it's going to be a big game, no doubt. That first 15 minutes is crucial, and hopefully we can get it right after you.
I've only just about recovered from that away day back in May. I will not be making the trip, but my brother will be. So I'll.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll be in touch, mate. But yeah, best of luck for the week.
I hope he has a rubbish day out.
I'm sure we'll have a great night, just as we did, even if the game isn't what we wanted. Cheers, mate.
Magic. All right, cheers, George. Look after yourself.
Likewise.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in once again today. We'll be back next week to review all of the action in the Carabao Cup and Premier League. Please remember to subscribe and give us a follow on YouTube or TikTok at cfc.waves for more content throughout the week. Thanks again and see you all soon.